Notice, in accordance to new copyright regulations, this episode of Quoth Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we might feature is kid-friendly, the context of the episode is to address adults and inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. In other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, etc. There is always the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well. Rated TV 16 and up. And, well, finally, I got on tonight. Started last night, had a little bit of a problem with the connection for live stream. It wasn't going completely through. It was kind of messing up in the middle of last night's show. And tonight it wasn't even connecting. I don't know what happened. Had to talk to some live stream people. They didn't know what was going on. Back and forth for a couple hours. And finally we got a connection. So hopefully this will be running well, and we'll get through this. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get straight to the good stuff. And John North is here saying hello, John. I know it's late. Hopefully, I won't bore you or put you to sleep. I appreciate you watching. We're gonna go with 10 of my favorite films of the 1980s from fantasy genre. There's going to be some films that people are going to think, oh, why didn't you think of stuff? And I'll address that after I get through these. But these are just, there's so many films to pick from. These are just 10 of them. We'll start with The Beastmaster from 1982, directed by Don Coscarelli, produced by Paul Pepperman, Donald P. Borchers, and Silvio Tabay. Written by Don Coscarelli and Paul Pepperman, based on the novel The Beastmaster by Andre Norton. It starred Mark Singer, Tanya Roberts, who recently passed away, unfortunately. I think it was recently anyway. I seem to remember being fairly recently. Rip Torn and John Amos. Production companies, Beastmaster NV, ECTA Film Production, and a whole bunch. I don't even know, GmbH and Company, KG. I don't know exactly who all that was, but they got quite a few of them. Distributed by MGM UA Entertainment Corporation. It was originally released in the theaters on August 20th, 1982, and it ran for an hour and 58 minutes. What it's about. In the kingdom of Uruk, or Aruk, the high priest Mayax is given a prophecy by his witches that he would die facing the son of King Zed. So he sends one of his witches to kidnap and kill the child, but before she can kill him, a villager rescues the child and raises him as his own son. Named Dar, while raised in the village of Emer, the child learns how to fight and discovers he has the ability to telepathically communicate with animals. Years later, a fully grown Dar witnesses his people being slaughtered by the Junes, a horde of fanatical barbarians allied with Mayax. Dar, the only survivor of the attack, journeys to Aruk to avenge his people. In time, Dar is joined by a golden eagle he names Sharak, a pair of thieving ferrets he names Kodo and Podo, and a panther he names Ru, or Ra. Eventually, Dar meets a redheaded slave girl named Kiri before getting himself lost and ending up surrounded by an eerie half-bird, half-human race who dissolve their prey for nourishment. As the birdmen worship eagles, they spare Dar when he summons Sharak, and they give him an amulet should he ever need their aid. After he leaves the birdmen, I guess you could say, he soon arrives at Uruk, where Mayax has assumed total control with the June support. He has taken the children of the village and is sacrificing them to his god Ar. Something is missing here. Okay, on his way to save her, meaning Kiri, Dar is joined by Zed's younger son Tal and his bodyguard Seth, learning that Kiri is Zed's niece, and the three work to save her. Well, Seth goes to gather their forces. Dar helps Kiri and Tal infiltrate the temple and rescue King Zed. Zed leads his forces to attack the city, but they're captured. Dar would then return and save them from being sacrificed. And in the conflict that follows, Mayax reveals Dar's relationship to Zed before slitting Zed's throat and facing Dar. Despite being stabbed and revived by his remaining witch before she was killed, Mayax is about to kill Dar when Kodo, the ferret, sacrifices himself by biting into the side of his face and causing the high priest to fall into the sacrificial flames. So it seems like they've won, but unfortunately their victory is short-lived, as the Zheng horde is now approaching Uruk, and they're going to arrive by nightfall and overtake the village. Only Dar sets a trap with the help of the villagers, and they fight. And Tao is wounded. That's the son. As Dar succeeds in burning most of the Jones alive while defeating their chieftain before the birdmen arrive to consume those remaining. The following day, Seth invites Dar to be the new king of their town. But Dar explains that Tao would make a better king, as he's more of a vagabond type character. And he leaves Uruk. Dar sets off into the wild with Kiri, Ru, Shuruk, and Poto, who we learn is actually a female ferret and has given birth to 2 new ferrets on the path to new adventures. Believe it or not, I did not realize that this movie was based on the novel series by Andre Norton. I didn't make that connection at all. I suspect that the reason I didn't is because the novel is about a Navajo Indian lead, and the story plays into the Navajo religion, and that clearly was not evident in the movies. So I never really thought about it being the same thing at all. I remember seeing this about the same time I saw Conan the Barbarian, which we'll talk about next, on cable circa 1985. The reason that I did this before Conan was because I'm just doing it in alphabetical order. There's no preferred number or I like this film or whatever. Yeah, it's just alphabetical. The movie is cheesy, I suppose, but my 13-year-old self was quite entertained, and I liked the animals, and yes, I'll admit it, Tanya Roberts certainly caught my attention at that young age as well. Unfortunately, the sequels, there were 2 of them. They were utter garbage, and I'm not going to even think about talking about them because I've never been able to sit through either one of them. The rating on the film is PG according to the Internet Movie Database. I could have sworn it was rated R because there's nudity and there's violence, and I don't see how it could have been a PG, but they say it's PG. Rating is 4 out of 5 stars. So let's go to Conan. That's our next one. This was also 1982. I saw this a few years later, again on cable. Directed by John Milius, written by John Milius and Oliver Stone, based on the characters created by Robert E. Howard. Produced by Buzz Feashens and Rafaela De Laurentiis, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, Sandal Bergman, Ben Davidson, Cassandra Gaviova, Jerry Lopez, Mako, Valerie Quinnessen, William Smith, and Max von Sydow. Production company was the Dino De Laurentiis Corporation and distributed by Universal Pictures North America and 20th Century Fox on the international scene. The runtime is 2 hours and 9 minutes. The story begins with a blacksmith forging a sword, who then shows it to his young son Conan and tells him of the riddle of steel, which is an aphorism on the importance of the metal to their people, the Sumerians. Young Conan's village is then massacred by a band of raiders led by Thulsa Doom. Conan's father is killed by dogs, and his sword is taken by Doom to decapitate Conan's mother, aided by Doom's entrancing gaze. The children are then taken into slavery and then chained into a large mill, known as the Wheel of Pain. There's a little bit of a musical thing going on where you see Conan grow up to adulthood and he becomes a massive muscular individual, while the other ones pretty much fall to the side and die. His master eventually trains him to become a gladiator, and after winning countless fights and receiving training and education in the East, Conan is freed. He is soon chased by wild dogs and seeks refuge in an Atlantean colonist warrior's tomb where he retrieves an ancient sword. He then wanders the world encountering a prophetic witch in a hut, and then befriends Subutai, a Hykranian thief and archer. This duo follow the witch's advice and go to the city of Zamora to seek out Falsa Doom. There they meet Valeria, a female brigand. That would be a thief. Together, the trio raid the Tower of Serpents, stealing jewels and other valuables from a shrine and slaying a giant snake in the process. After escaping with their loot, the thieves celebrate and Conan has sex with Valeria. The city guards capture the trio, however, and bring them to King Osric, who requests they rescue his daughter, Princess Yasmina, who is now a zealot in Doom's cult, for a sizable reward. Subutai and Valeria really don't want to do this, and they refuse to take up the quest. But Conan is motivated by his hatred for Doom and his desire for vengeance against him, so he sets off alone to the villain's temple of Set. Disguised as a priest, Conan infiltrates the temple, but he is discovered, captured, and tortured. Doom lectures him on the power of flesh, which he demonstrates by hypnotically enticing a girl to leap to her death. He then orders for Conan to be crucified on a tree of woe. The barbarian is on the verge of death when he is discovered by Subutai and brought to Akiro, the Wizard of the Mounds, who lives on a burial site for warriors. And Akiro summons spirits to heal Conan and warns that they will extract a heavy toll, which Valeria says she is willing to pay. These spirits also try to abduct Conan and his spirit, but he is restored to health after Valeria and Subutai fend them off. Subutai and Valeria agree to help Conan then complete Osric's quest and infiltrate the Temple of Set. As the cult indulges in a cannibalistic orgy, the thieves attack and flee with the princess, but Conan is unable to engage Doom, who is magically transformed into a large snake and slithers away. Valeria is mortally wounded in the fight by Doom after he shoots her with a stiffened snake like an arrow shaft. She dies in Conan's arms, acknowledging the price of the toll forewarned by the wizard in exchange for Conan's life, and she is cremated at the Mounds, where Conan prepares with Subutai and the wizard Akiro to battle Falsa Doom. Conan asks Crom, the god of his people, to grant him revenge. And this is one of the most famous scenes. If you don't give me revenge, then go to hell, Crom, or whatever, type thing. I don't remember the exact phrase, but it's a very funny moment in the film. Anyway, they've made booby traps, and they use advantage of exploiting the terrain, and they manage to slay all of Doom's warriors as they arrive. But just when Rexor, one of Doom's lieutenants, is about to overcome Conan, Valeria reappears for a brief moment as a Valkyrie to save him from the mortal blow. I don't know if she's really a Valkyrie, but it kind of gives you that, but the Valkyrie doesn't really fit the motif of Conan. It's separate. I don't know. It's that was a little bit odd there, but anyway. After losing his men, Doom shoots a stiffened snake at the princess that they have with them, but Subutai deflects it with his shield, and the villain flees to his temple. The battle ends with Conan having recovered his father's sword from his enemies, but the sword is now splintered by his own hand in battle. He still takes the sword, though, and he sneaks back to the temple where Doom is addressing the remaining member of his cult. He confronts Doom, who receives him with open arms and attempts to mesmerize him with his snake-like hypnotic powers. But the barbarian resists and uses his father's broken sword to behead his nemesis. After Disillusion's cultists disperse, Conan burns down the temple and returns the princess home. Now, like I said, I didn't see this until a few years after it was in theaters when it came on cable. This is because when it came out in theaters, I was only 10 years old. My parents were not big movie people to go to the theater to begin with, and they certainly never would have taken me to see this movie at 10 years old anyway. But in 85, I had just started reading Conan comics around that same time and was starting to play Dungeons and Dragons, so this was the perfect gateway film into the genre for me at the time, and it set the tone for many of the other films I would watch in the 80s in this genre. Unfortunately, the later Conan films and the Red Sonja spinoff that had oh geez, I can't even think of her name right now. Brigitte Nielsen did not remotely appeal to me as much as this film did, which I know a lot of people think is weird. You might think it's a little bit crazy, as Conan the Destroyer, which was the sequel to this film, was written by comics legends Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. But the thing is, they didn't write the screenplay, they wrote the story. And the screenwriter, Stanley Mann, did not adapt their story very well, I didn't think. And I don't think the director, Richard Fleischer, really captured the same level of darkness and brutality that Milius did in this movie. The later Conan films are more comedic and light adventure in tone, and that just doesn't speak Conan to me. Sadly, the story that I think should have followed this movie, which would have been the tale of Conan and Belit as pirates on the Black Coast, has never seen production, although there have been people who have tried to make it. Perhaps it was just too expensive to make back then in the 80s. I don't know. Today it shouldn't have be a problem. We've got plenty of those kind of Pirates of the Caribbeans and other stuff, so I think we could do that today. But I really think Hollywood has missed the target with the franchise after this original exceptional start. I give the first Conan Barbarian from 82 a 5-star rating, and of course it was rated R. Our next film is Dragonslayer from 1981. And John says, I remember Beastmaster was quite the cable TV staple back in the day, and it was. Dragonslayer of 81 was directed by Matthew Robbins and produced by Hal Barwood with Howard W. Koch, written by Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, starring Peter McNichol, Caitlin Clark, Ralph Richardson, John Hallam, Peter Ear, Sidney Bromley, Chloe Solomon, and Ian McDermott, which you guys would now know, of course, became the Emperor in Star Wars films much later in life. Production companies are Paramount Pictures and Walt Disney Productions, distributed by Paramount Pictures North America and Buena Vista International Distribution internationally, because Disney didn't want to release it because it wasn't really a Disney movie, even though they should have been distributing it. The release date was June 26th of 81, and it was an hour and 49 minutes long. What it's about is Erlin, which is a 6th century post-Roman kingdom situated near the river is being terrorized by the Verithamax pejorative, which is a 400-year-old dragon. To appease this creature, King Cassiodorus offers it virgin girls selected by lottery twice a year. An expedition led by a young man called Valerian seeks the last sorcerer, Ulrich of Kraganmore, for help to destroy the dragon. Tyrion, the brutal and cynical captain of Cassiodorus' royal guard, has followed this expedition. He and his lieutenant Gerbil openly intimidate the wizard, doubtful of his abilities. Ulrich invites Tyrion to stab him to prove his magical powers. Tyrion does so, and Ulrich dies instantly, much to the horror of his young apprentice, Galen Bardwarden, and his elderly servant Hodge, who then cremates Ulrich's body and places the ashes into a leather pouch. Hodge informs Galen that Ulrich wanted his ashes spread over a lake of burning water. Galen is selected by the wizard's magical amulet as its next owner. Encouraged, he journeys to Erland. On the way, he discovers that Valerian is really a young woman who is disguised to avoid being selected in the lottery. In an effort to discourage the expedition, Tyrion kills Hodge, who, just before dying, hands Galen Ulrich's ashes. Arriving in Erland, Galen inspects the dragon's lair and magically seals, or so he thinks he seals, its entrance with a rock slide. Tyrion then apprehends Galen and takes him to Castle Morganthorn, from which King Cassiodorus governs Erland. Cassiodorus guesses that Galen is not a real wizard and complains that his attack may have angered the dragon instead of killing it, as his own brother and predecessor once did. Thus, the king confiscates the amulet and imprisons Galen. His daughter, however, Princess Elspeth, visits Galen and is shocked when he informs her of her rumor that the lottery is rigged. It excludes her name and those who are rich enough to bribe the king into disqualifying their children. Her father is unable to lie convincingly whenever she confronts him over this. Meanwhile, the dragon does free himself from its prison and causes an earthquake. Galen narrowly escapes from his prison, but he doesn't have the amulet. The village priest, Brother Jacopus, leads his congregation to confront the dragon, denouncing it as the devil, but the dragon incinerates him and then heads for the village's swan's comb, burning all in its path. Now, because of this, the lottery must begin right now anew, and Elspeth, knowing that this is not right, she rigs the draw so that only her name can be chosen. Consequently, King Cassiodorus has to return the amulet to Galen so that he might save her. Galen uses the amulet to enchant a heavy spear that had been forged by Valerian's father, which he had dubbed the Sicarius Dracorum, or a dragon slayer, with the ability to pierce the dragon's armored hide. Valerian then gathers some molded dragon scales to create a shield for Galen. Valerian laments now that her gender cover is blown, she'll be eligible for the lottery since she herself is still a virgin, and that Galen has fallen in love with the Princess Elspeth. But Galen admits he has fallen in love, but it's not with Elspeth, it's with her, that who he is in love with. The couple kiss, and thus realizing their romantic feelings for one another. But Galen still has to go and fight the dragon. Attempting to rescue Elspeth, Galen then fights Tyrion and kills him because Tyrion's going to try and make sure that the dragon gets the princess. The princess, however, is determined to make amends for all the girls whose names have been chosen in the past. And so, even though Galen frees her, she descends down into the dragon's cave and ultimately to her death. Galen follows her and finds a brood of young dragons feasting on her corpse. Pretty gruesome. So he kills these young dragons, and then he finds Vermithrax resting by an underground lake of fire. Keep that in mind. He manages to wound the dragon with the spear, but the spear gets broken, and only Valerian's shield saves him from his own incineration. Vermithrax escapes, and after his failure to kill him, Valerian convinces Galen to leave Swanscombe with her. As they both prepare to depart, the amulet gives Galen a vision, which explains his teacher's final wishes. He used Galen to deliver him to Erlen because Ulrich knew that he couldn't make the journey. And he had asked for his ashes to be spread over burning water, which is in the dragon's cave. So finally, Galen makes the connection, and he returns to the cave. So when he spreads the ashes over the firelight, the wizard is resurrected within the flames, and he reveals that his time is short and that Galen must destroy the amulet when the time is right. The wizard then transports himself to a mountaintop where he summons a storm and confronts Vermithrax. These names are something else. I'd imagine any of these guys had to play these characters and say these names would have stumbled along them quite a bit. After a brief battle, the monster snatches the old man and flies away with him. Cued by Ulrich, Galen crushes the amulet with a rock, and the wizard body explodes, kills the dragon instantly, and the dragon's corpse descends and crashes from the sky. In the aftermath of this, the villagers inspecting the wreckage, of course, they credit God with the victory, not the wizard or Galen. The king arrives, drives a sword into the dragon's broken carcass, and claims the glory for himself, as if he'd done anything. And Galen and Valerian leave Erlen together, and he just confesses, well, he misses Ulrich and the amulet, and he says, I just wish we had a horse. And suddenly a white horse appears, and the couple use the horse to ride away. And that's closed scene. Now, this film bombed at the box office. It didn't even get back 60% of its budget. And I'm pretty sure that is because while it was a Disney Productions movie and it was kind of hyped as a Disney movie, back then it was not a kid-friendly movie. It was much more British, much more dry of a movie, not kid-friendly at all. Very somber, very British feel to it. And I don't think American audiences appreciated that when it came out. My first exposure to the story was actually the Marvel Comics adaptation. And I thought the comic was dull, to be honest. Then I saw the movie, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, what did I miss here? overall, I do think it's a much underrated classic fantasy film. It is also rated PG, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Our next film is Excalibur from 81. But let's see what John says. John says he hasn't watched Dragon Slayer in ages, but I do remember thinking the dragon was very well done. I need to watch it again to see how it holds up. Yeah, the dragon, the graphics for the dragon were very well for the time. I think, the whole film kind of holds up for the era it was made in. These days things are done so much differently. It's interesting to see what would happen if some of these movies got made today comparative to when they were made. Our next film is Excalibur from 81, directed and produced by John Boorman, screenplay by John Boorman and Roscoe Pallenberg, based on Lamort D'Arthur by Thomas Mallory. Starring Nigel Terry, Helen Mirren, Nicholas Clay, Sheri Lungi, Paul Jeffrey, Nicole Williamson, Liam Neeson, and Patrick Stewart. Look at this cast, folks. I mean, Helen Mirren, Liam Neeson, Patrick Stewart. You're thinking, wow, well, they were acting back then, but they were. I mean, it was just it's wild to think about it. The production company was Orion Pictures, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures, and was released in April 10th of 81. The running time is 2 hours and 21 minutes. This is the American running time. The actual full-length director's cut is over 3 hours. And, of course, what it's about. Well, this is the story of King Arthur. And so the sorcerer Merlin retrieves Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake for Uther Pendragon, who secures a brief alliance with the Duke of Cornwall. Merlin agrees to help Uther seduce Cornwall's wife, Igraine, on the condition that he give Merlin whatever results from his lust. Merlin then transforms Uther into Cornwall's likeness with a charm of making, and Cornwall's daughter Morgana senses her father's mortal injury during his assault on Uther's camp. While Igraine is fooled and Uther impregnates her, Morgana sees through it, watching Uther as Cornwall dies in battle. 9 months later, Merlin takes Uther's son Arthur. Uther pursues but is killed by Cornwall's knights. Uther thrusts Excalibur into a stone, exclaiming that no one shall wield Excalibur but me, and Merlin proclaims, well, he who will draw the sword from the stone, he shall be king. And the story progresses through Arthur being knighted and meeting Leon de Grance's daughter Guinevere, the encounter with Lancelot, the undefeated knight that Arthur then defeats but not fairly, and then he loses Excalibur and then has to get permission from the Lady of the Lake, etc. The formations round table and the rest of the storyline. There's way too much stuff for me to summarize here. We'll just move on. My thoughts is the film is a tour de force cast whose members would go on to international fame and fortune, while the script and story may seem to go on forever because, well, let's face it, the entirety of the story does go on forever, and these days would probably be made into a Peter Jackson Hobbit-like franchise. The cast performances are stellar throughout. The 2 hour plus version, that is the regular R version, is the one I prefer. I do not like the 3 hour extra one. I think that's too long. And there's also an hour 59-minute version, which is PG. And that was made because HBO wanted a cleaner version of the movie to air for the daytime hours where kids might see it, and then they'd run the full theatrical release in the late night hours. This is a very underrated film. It is a precursor and inspiration of Jackson's Lord of the Rings films. In fact, Boorman was offered the Lord of the Rings franchise in 1969 based on the original script for this movie. Think about that for a moment, too. Not only were they talking about doing a live-action Lord of the Rings movies in 1969, but then they took 12 years to get this movie made and released. That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's really something else. I don't know. I really do enjoy the movie, though, and it belongs in my top 10 for the 80s. 4 out of 5 stars. Our next one is KRULL. And this is kind of maybe, I don't know what you want to call it, a guilty pleasure film, maybe in a way, but it's from 1983, directed by Peter Yates, produced by Ron Silverman, written by Stanford Sherman, starring Ken Marshall, Lysette Anthony, Freddie Jones, Liam Neeson again, Bernard Bresslaw, and Francesca Annis. Production company is Barclays Mercantile Industrial Finance. That's an interesting one, isn't it? You're scratching your head, huh? Distributed by Columbia Pictures, released July 29th of 83 in running time of 2 hours and 1 minute. Now, before I saw the movie, I actually read the novelization by Alan Dean Foster, so I was kind of spoiled a little bit because I already knew the story before I saw the movie. The planet KRULL is invaded by an entity known as the Beast and his army of slayers, who travel the galaxy in a mountain-like spaceship called the Black Fortress. In a ceremony involving newlyweds exchanging a handful of flame, Prince Colwyn, played by Marshall, and Princess Lisa, played by Lysette Anthony, plan to marry and form an alliance between their rival kingdoms in the hope that their combined forces can defeat the Beast's army. The Slayers attack, however, before the wedding ceremony is completed, killing the two kings, devastating both armies, and kidnapping the princess. Prince Colwyn is found and nursed back to health by Ynir, the Old One. Ynir tells him that the Beast can be defeated with the glaive, an ancient, magical 5-pointed throwing star. Colwyn retrieves the glaive from a high mountain cave before setting out to track down the Black Fortress, which teleports to a new location every day at sunrise. As they travel, Colwyn and Ynir are joined by the magician Ergo the Magnificent and his band of 9 thieves, fighters, bandits, and brawlers. Colwyn offers to clear their criminal records if they succeed in defeating the Beast. Later, the Cyclops Rel joins the group as well. Rel is actually kind of my favorite character in the ship, too. I just love the graphics on that character, the makeup for him. Colwyn's group travels to the home of the Emerald Seer and his apprentice, Titch. The Emerald Seer uses his crystal to view where the fortress will rise, but the Beast's hand magically appears and crushes the crystal. The group then travels to a swamp that cannot be penetrated by the Beast's magic, but Slayers attack, killing 2 of their group. An agent of the Beast, Changeling, kills the Emerald Seer, and before he can confirm the next location of the fortress, and assumes the Seer's form, but is himself uncovered and killed by Rel and Colwyn. While the group rests in the forest, Keegan, which is one of the 9 group members, goes to a nearby village and gets Mirith, one of his wives, to bring food to them. The Beast exerts remote command of Mirith's helper, who attempts to seduce Colwyn in order to convince Lisa that he does not love her, but Colwyn rejects the helper's advances. The helper then tries to kill Colwyn and fails. Ynir leaves the resting group to journey to the Widow of the Web. In the meantime, now the Widow of the Web is an enchantress who loved Ynir long ago and was exiled to the lair of the Crystal Spider for murdering their only child. The Widow reveals where the Black Fortress will be at sunrise. Now, I don't know why they call her the Widow of the Web other than its nice alliterative name, because Ynir's obviously alive, so she can't be his widow because he's alive. So it's kind of a weird name there, but we'll let it go. Oops, something got messed up here. Anyway, what happens is Ynir goes into the lair of the spider, and the widow has like a glass hourglass of sand that protects her from the spider, and she hands it over to Ynir, who escapes with the information of where the Black Forest will be next. And when he gets to Colwyn, the hourglass runs out and Ynir dies. The group capture and then ride magical fire mares, which are basically just Clydesdales. uh, but they're supposed to run super fast. That's why they're called fire mares. And they reach the Black Fortress and before it teleports again. Slayers at the fortress kill another of their group, Rune, while Rel the Cyclops sacrifices himself to hold the crushing spaceship doors long enough to allow the others to enter. That was one of the sad points of the film, because like I said, I really did like the Cyclops, especially the makeup on him. They did a great job on that. Slayers then inside kill Queen and Ninog, and Kenan sacrifices his own life to save Torquil as they journey through the fortress, trying to get to the beast. Meanwhile, Ergo and Titch get separated from the others and are attacked by Slayers, and Ergo magically transforms into a tiger to kill the Slayers and save Titch's life. This is kind of a weird thing, because you're like, well, why didn't you do that earlier in the show? But it is what it is. Anyway, Colin, Torquil, Bardolph, and Osmond are trapped inside a large dome. Colin attempts to open a hole in the dome with his glaive, while the other three search for any other passageway. As a result, they fall through an opening and are trapped between slowly closing walls studded with huge spikes, which eventually kill Bardolph. Meanwhile, Colin breaches the dome and finds Lisa. He attacks the beast and injures it with the glaive, but the glaive becomes embedded inside the beast's body. This leaves them with nothing to defend themselves against the beast's counterattack. But Lisa realizes that they must quickly finish their wedding ritual, giving them the linked power to shoot living flame. They do this, and together they finally slay the beast. The beast's death frees Torquil and Osmond from the spike room, and they rejoin Colin and Lisa, and then Ergo and Titch show up, and they make their way out of the self-destructing fortress. Colin and Lisa, now king and queen of the combined kingdoms, name Torquil as the Lord Marshal, and the surviving heroes depart across a field. And as the narrator of the story repeats the opening sequence statement of the prophecy that the son of the queen and her chosen king shall rule the galaxy. Like I said, I first read the novelization by Alan Dean Foster, so I don't know how I would have reacted had I seen the movie first. The movie's okay. I actually like the book better. But I just love the glaive as a weapon. I love the design of the glaive. I thought it was a little bit crazy. How do you catch it when you throw it? But because it's kind of like a boomerang thing. But okay. I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't know if it would still hold up. But I can still remember. I remember I still enjoyed the movie well into my 20s and early 30s, so I probably would still like it. There are some weird facts about this movie as well. Lizette Anthony had her dialogue completely replaced by actress Lindy Krause because the directors didn't think that her voice was mature enough. They said it was too childlike, didn't have enough, enough force, maybe enough bass to it. I don't know. Both Marshall and Anthony would have respectable careers in television and film after this movie, which was considered a bomb at the box office after only recouping half its budget. Marshall would go on to play the role of Michael Eddington on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, while Anthony would appear on the BBC sitcom 3 Up, 2 Down and the 90s primetime revival of Dark Shadows, which maybe John knows that. I don't know. But this was a huge influence film on me, though, as a kid. I can remember writing up a Dungeons and Dragons campaign based on the film, where I had a fortress that teleported around, and the gaming group had to go through side quests to figure out how to find it before the fortress would teleport away again, and stuff like that. And I probably did create characters, figured out for that, for the Slayers and the Beast, but I can't say for sure, but I probably did. It's not as strong as some of the films on this list, but I still think it'd be something I would enjoy today. It's rated PG. I'd give it 3 out of 5 stars. And John says, yes, he does remember 90s Dark Shadows. That's cool. So let's go ahead and move on to our next film. Or before that, take a look at this. There's the glaive. Now tell me that weapon doesn't look cool. You can even give people the bird. Meanwhile, the actor's thinking, I went to Juilliard for this. Because he did. He actually did go to Juilliard school. He actually went to Juilliard at the same time as Robin Williams. And, Kelsey Grammer, who plays Frasier. Mm-hmm. Would you believe this guy is 70 now? It's like, wow, but that's how long ago these films were made. Our next film is Labyrinth from 1986, directed by Jim Henson, produced by Eric Rattray, screenplay by Terry Jones, officially, but the uncredited screenwriters include Jim Henson, Laura Phillips, Elaine May, and George Lucas. The story was by Dennis Lee and Jim Henson, starring David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. Production companies are Henson Associates Incorporated and Lucasfilm Limited. Distributed by TriStar Pictures in the United States, it was released on June 27th of 1986 and has a runtime of 1 hour and 31 minutes. What it's about, 16-year-old Sarah comes home late as her father and stepmother plan to go out for dinner, and she is tasked with babysitting her infant half-brother Toby. Frustrated by the child's crying and the fact that he somehow got a hold of a prized stuffed animal of hers, she wishes the child to be taken by the Goblin King, a character in a book she's been reading. Unbeknownst to her, however, Jareth the Goblin King is real, and he grants her a wish and sends his minions to abduct Toby and bring him to his dimension. Instantly regretting her actions, she pleads with Jareth to return the child. Jareth then gives Sarah 13 hours to try to make her way through his labyrinth in order to save her baby brother, or he will be transformed into a goblin and lost forever. Now, one of the funny things I think about this is 13 hours. I realize that it's 13 hours in Jareth's dimension versus however much time in our dimension. But, if you think about it, you got 13 hours to find your infant child. Yeah, mom and dad are going to be back before that. I'm in deep shit. Anyway, this was Jim Henson's last directorial work, unfortunately. Much like his earlier fantasy film, The Dark Crystal from 1982, audiences really didn't know what to make of this film, and it bombed at the box office in the United States, earning only half of its budget back. It, of course, has since become a cult hit, and it's really a shame how these amazing fantasy movies that Henson was making, because Dark Crystal also was a bomb at the box office, were overlooked. Maybe they were just not kiddie-friendly enough, and people thought he should only do Sesame Street or something. I don't know. Or maybe the films were just too intelligent for most audiences. Anyway, David Bowie is stellar in this movie. I mean, he just oozes sinister. He just oozes sex appeal, both aplomb, with his performance of Jareth. And this was an early Jennifer Connelly. It's only her second lead performance in the film at the age of 15 when she made this. I suspect many critics at the time found her underwhelming compared to Bowie and probably panned her for it. And that's a shame, because Bowie's like a force of nature in this movie, and even an extremely experienced performer would have had a difficult time measuring an equal level of performance to his in this film. I picked Labyrinth over Dark Crystal because I felt this one has more universal appeal. After all, who among you who have had siblings to care for have not wished them gone at some point in your life? It's also kind of a sexual coming-of-age story for Sarah, as it's clear that the real reason that Goblin King Jareth has answered her wish is because he wants her as his companion, as is evidenced by his many attempts to seduce her and trick her into being trapped into his dimension. And the reality is, after the ordeal is over, that Sarah becomes more self-aware, not only as a sister, but as a woman in care of a child. And that's a maturing evidence, coming of age, sexual awareness in that manner as well. Again, these layers of meaning aren't innocent kiddie fair enough, and it made audiences bawl because they had a certain expectation from Henson. It's a cult classic now, but I think it's probably one of the more underrated films of the 1980s. It's rated PG, I believe. It's not PG. Yeah, PG, not PG-13. It's kind of weird how some of these films got PG and PG-13 because PG-13 came in the middle of the 80s, and some films just it's weird which ones got what rating. But anyway, this is a 4-star film. Who knows what other films Henson would have made had those films done well? Bowie sensational and contributor. Yes, the soundtrack for Labyrinth is amazing. That's true too. It is very true. Let's go on to our next film, which is Ladyhawke, 1985, directed by Richard Donner, produced by Richard Donner and Lawrence Schuler. Screenplay by Edward Kamara and Michael Thomas, Tom Mankiewicz, and uncredited David Peoples include. Yeah, that PG rating isn't what it used to be. Nope, it's not. It stars Matthew Broderick, Rutger Hauer, Michelle Pfeiffer, Leo McKern, and John Wood. Production companies Warner Brothers Pictures and 20th Century Fox, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures, released April 12th of 85 with a runtime of 2 hours and a minute. Now I cut to the other. You see, I went to a different poster. Both of these are different theatrical posters that were done for Ladyhawke. I just happen to like this one a little bit better, but I wanted to show the other one because that one apparently was the more common one for the first graphic. In medieval France, Philip Gaston, a thief known as the Mouse, that's played by Broderick, escapes from the Bishop of Aquila's dungeons right before his execution. He's recaptured at an inn by the bishop's guards, led by Captain Marquette. However, the former captain, Etienne Navarre, shows up and defeats Marquette and the guards. He rides off with Philip with his hawk, while his hawk scatters the other guards along the way. Navarre, accompanied by Philip, stay the night at a farmer's barn. Philip narrowly escapes the farmer's attempt on his life when an enormous black wolf emerges and kills the farmer. Navarre then has disappeared from the barn. A mysterious young woman appears and accompanies the wolf. Navarre later appears and reveals his intention to kill the bishop. Or I should say he reappears and then reveals his intention to kill the bishop and asks Philip to help him get inside the castle of Aquila. Philip refuses to help him, and then Navarre says, okay, fine. I'll tie you to a tree that night. And so you can't, get in my way. Philip escapes by tricking the mysterious woman that night into untying him, but then Philip is then captured by the bishop's guards, and the guards set up an ambush to capture Navarre as well. In the ambush, Navarre and his hawk are each hit by a crossbow bolt, yet he manages to defeat the bishop's guards and save Philip. The wounded Navarre makes Philip take the dying hawk and ride his horse to a monk's ruined castle. His name's Imperius. And so they go to this ruined castle for help. The hawk is sequestered in a room, but a curious Philip picks the lock and then finds a mysterious woman inside, her chest also struck with a bolt. After tending to her wound, Imperius explains that she is Isabeau of Anjou. She and Navarre were cursed by the bishop because she refused the bishop's overtures of love, and Navarre and she had secret vows to one another, and he accidentally leaked them to the bishop himself in a drunken confession. Thus, the satanic curse turns Isabeau into a hawk by day and Navarre into a wolf by night, so that despite their always being together, they are eternally apart. When Navarre catches up in the morning, Imperius tells him that the curse can be broken if the couple face Bishop together as humans on a day without a night and a night without a day. Navarre dismisses Imperius as an old drunk and continues his way to Aquila, intent on simply killing the bishop, and decides to leave with Navarre, or Philip decides to leave with Navarre and Ladyhawke. Now, in the meantime, they are they have an encounter with Caesar the Wolf Trapper, and both both of them get hurt again, and Philip has to save Navari Wolf from freezing in an icy river. He succeeds in persuading the couple to break the curse. At night, Imperius and Isabeau smuggle the Navari Wolf into Aquila while Philip dives into the sewers to get inside the cathedral. Unable to see any divine sign on the day that he and Isabeau are to appear in the flesh together, Navari then reverts to his original plan to kill the bishop. He convinces Imperius to euthanize the hawk should the cathedral bells ring, which would mean he had failed. Philip infiltrates the cathedral and unlocks the doors. Navari rides in and duels with Marquette. Amid the bout, Navari sees a solar eclipse through a high window and then realizes that the curse really can be broken. He tries to get back to Imperius, but fails to keep the guards from ringing the bell. Despairing that Imperius has now killed his beloved Isabeau, he then continues his fight and eventually kills Marquette. As Navari is about to kill the bishop, Isabeau enters the cathedral and stops him. Together they face the bishop together and break the curse. This drives the bishop insane, and he tries to kill Isabeau, only to die by Navari's sword instead. And Isabeau and Navari finally embrace in joy, and all is well. My thoughts on this particular film. John says the musical score was completely wrong for the movie. I don't know. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Again, I haven't seen it recently. It's been a while, but yeah, that's when we'll definitely have to watch again and check on that. Anyway, this is a masterpiece of dark fantasy and romance. Michelle Pfeiffer is alluring and so captivating on the screen that her sensuality carries over to her hawk form. You actually, it's so well done that you actually feel like she is the hawk. Yeah. So at least I did. Howard, on the other hand, is a bit campy, but then outside of his performance as Roy Batty in Blade Runner, he's always been a kind of campish actor, so I can't really say anything about that. Matthew Broderick is also very savvy in the way he delivers his lines. There's several lines in the script that were probably too contemporary for the period, but he manages to give them a timeless feel so that you aren't jarred out of the fantasy or the era of what time it's taking place. This film was PG rated PG-13. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy this story a lot, and it's one of my kind of, I won't say it's my go-to. If I had this on video, I would probably watch it all the time, but I don't, unfortunately. Our next film is Legend from '85, directed by Ridley Scott, produced by Arnon Milchan, written by William Hortzberg, starring a young Tom Cruise, a young Mia Sara, Tim Curry, who is, Tim Curry, David Bennett, Alice Playton, Billy Barty, and Cork Hubert. The production company is Embassy International Pictures NV. Distributed by Universal Pictures. It was released on December 13th of '85, and there are 2 running times because there's 2 cuts, of course, because this is a Ridley Scott movie. The theatrical film, there's actually 3 cuts. The running time for the U.S. theatrical cut is 1 hour 29 minutes. The director's cut by Ridley Scott is 1 hour 54 minutes. I go with the U.S. theatrical cut, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Well, what it's about: in order to cast the world into eternal night, the Lord of Darkness, played by Tim Curry, sends the Goblin Blix on a mission to kill the unicorns in the forest near his castle that guard the light and bring them their horns. Blix and his colleagues Pox and Blunder follow impetuous Princess Lily as she visits her forest-dwelling paramour, Jack O'Green. Lily, of course, is played by Mia Sara, and Jack O'Green played by Tom Cruise. Later, Jack blindfolds and takes Lily to the lair of the unicorns. As Lily distracts the stallion by stroking it, Blix shoots it with a poison dart from his blowpipe, and the unicorns flee. With the couple unaware of the goblins, Lily makes light of Jack's fears concerning her sin and sets him a challenge by throwing her ring into a pond, declaring she will marry whoever will find it. While Jack dives in after the ring, the goblins find a dying stallion and sever its horn, which they call an alicorn, but I just call it a horn. An apocalyptic winter then descends, and Lily runs off in terror, and Jack is barely able to break through the surface of the now frozen pond, but he does escape the pond. Lily takes refuge in a frozen cottage of a kind and friendly family. There she sees the goblins testing the horn's musical powers and overhears them about how she had a role in slaying the unicorn by her actions, and by doing so casting the dark winter upon the land. Determined to make amends for her unwitting mistake, she follows the goblins to their rendezvous with Lord Darkness, who then tells them that the world will not be cast in eternal night as long as the mayor still lives. Meanwhile, Jack, accompanied by the forest elf Honeythorn Gump, the fairy Una, and the dwarves Brown Tom and Screwball, find the mayor mourning the lifeless stallion. Lamenting over his role in their current predicament, Jack cries and apologizes to the mayor, who tells him that the horn must be recovered and returned to the stallion. Leaving Brown Tom to guard the unicorns, Jack and the others retrieve a hidden cache of ancient weapons and armor. While they are gone, Lily tries to make things right by helping to save the mayor from the goblins, but they overpower Tom and capture both the mayor and Lily. Learning of what has transpired, Jack and his group make their way to the castle in the middle of a swamp. On the way, they are nearly killed by a swamp hag named Meg Mucklebones. I love these names. But they defeat her by flattering her appearances until they can get close enough to decapitate her. After reaching the castle, Jack's group falls into an underground prison cell in a hellish kitchen. There, Una offers to use her magic to escape their cell and retrieve keys to free the others if she receives a kiss from Jack. He is tempted by Una when she turns into an amorous lily, but then he refuses to follow through, telling her human hearts don't work that way. Una is greatly offended and scolds Jack, reminding him that it was his lust that caused the apocalypse that's upon them. Despite this, she does remember what's at stake and frees everyone so that they can all search for Lily and the mayor. Having fallen in love with Lily himself, or perhaps not love, but lust, Darkness tempts her with jewelry, a beautiful dress, and promises of power and glory. Seemingly seduced, Lily is transformed into a darker being, and she agrees to wed Darkness under a condition that she will be the one to kill the mayor in the upcoming ritual. Now, if you'll remember earlier in the movie, she said she'd only marry the person who got the ring out of the water, and that ain't Darkness. So we know something's up. Overhearing their conversation, Jack and Gump learn that Darkness can be destroyed by daylight. So the ritual begins. Lily, instead of killing the mayor, frees her, but gets knocked out and possibly even killed by Darkness. While the others relay the light of the setting sun using their platters, Jack fights Darkness, finally wounding him with the severed horn from the stallion unicorn. And then when the redirected light from the others' platters blasts Darkness into his chest, it blasts sunlight into his chest, it knocks him back off an edge and into a void. And Darkness warns them that because evil lurks in everyone, he will never be truly vanquished. Jack hesitates as he realizes this is probably true, or is true, but he overcomes his doubt and severs the evil hand holding the unicorn horn, thus expelling Darkness into the void. Gump returns with the stallion's horn, returning the stallion to life and ending the winter. Jack then retrieves the mystic ring from the pond and returns it to Lily, returning her to life. My thoughts. Tim Curry as Lord Darkness is excellent. Cruz and Sarah are okay, but I think looking back on things, their characters are rather one-dimensional. I don't know. It's interesting. I think really Tim Curry really carries the movie as far as the characters go. Now, as I said, there are three different endings to this movie. I like the U.S. theatrical one best. The director's cut ending is lame because after all that they've gone through, Lily and Jack decide they're just going to be friends and go live separate lives. That is, why would you go through all that and then not be together? I don't know. I didn't care for that. The European cut is virtually identical to the U.S. cut, but at the end, when the stallion and the mare unicorns are running through the forest, in the U.S. version, Curry's evil laughter is heard at the end, or not Curry's, but Lord Darkness's evil laughter is heard at the end to let you know that he has not been vanquished. Whereas in the European cut, that's cut out. So I don't like that European cut. I like the U.S. cut with the laughter at the end. It is rated PG. I don't know if I would have rated it PG. I think I would have probably gone PG-13. But, like I said, that PG to PG-13 rating back then was kind of weird. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It's not as good as some of the other ones. The next film is The Sword and the Sorcerer from 1982, directed by Albert Pyun, produced by Robert S. Remsen, Brandon Chase, and Marianne Chase, written by Albert Pyun, Tom Karnowski, and John V. Stuckmeyer, starring Lee Horsley, better known as Matt Houston, Kathleen Beller, Simon McCorkindale, also known as Manimal, George Maharis, and Richard Lynch. I don't know if Richard Lynch, shouldn't say Richard Lynch. I think that's a typo. It's Richard Mall. Anyway, Group 1 International Distribution Organization released, I don't even know who produced this thing. But anyway, it's released in April 23rd, 1982. It's an hour and 39 minutes long, and it is a stinker, but it's a guilty pleasure movie for me. What it's about: King Titus Cromwell and his men land ashore of Tomb Island in search of Zucia of Delos, a long-dead sorcerer who may be the key to overthrowing his rival King Richard, whose land of Edan is the richest in the world. Using one of Zucia's worshippers to awaken him, Cromwell convinces Zucia to join his cause. With the sorcerer's black magic at his command, Cromwell easily lays waste to Richard's formidable army. Eventually, Cromwell becomes eager to get rid of Zucia, fearing that the sorcerer could turn against him. So he attempts to kill Zucia by stabbing him in the chest and chasing him off a cliff. With only one army left to defend the city, King Richard prepares to lead the charge against Cromwell in a last-ditch effort to save Edan. He orders his family to evacuate to the river and entrusts his youngest son, Talon, with his triple-bladed projectile sword, instructing the boy to avenge his death should it occur, which of course it does. Fast forward to 11 years later, Talon returns as a seasoned warrior seeking to avenge his family, even as a sinister Zucia, very much alive, vows to repay Cromwell for his treachery. In the city of Edan, a rebellion has begun under Prince Micah, son of King Richard's closest advisor, who many believe to be the rightful heir to the throne. After confirming the final plans with Macaulay, Cromwell's war chancellor, who is secretly a double agent, Micah relays this news to his sister Alana, but Cromwell suddenly bursts into her hideout and a battle ensues. Although Micah is captured, Alana flees through the city streets, and she is eventually cornered by Cromwell's men. But then she is rescued by Talon, who easily dispatches her assailants. He takes her to a nearby tavern, and Alana learns of her brother's imprisonment, and she asks Talon to rescue him along with a faction of rebels who have recently been trapped by Cromwell's forces. Unable to bribe the lustful mercenary with gold, Alana reluctantly offers herself to him for one night, should he free everybody. Satisfied with these conditions, he departs on his mission, but Cromwell's men arrive shortly thereafter and capture Alana as well. Successful in freeing the rebels, Talon then infiltrates the castle through the sewers and is able to also rescue Micah, but then is subsequently defeated and captured by Cromwell himself. After forcing Alana into a forced marriage, Cromwell invites the 4 neighboring kings to their wedding feast, where he intends to assassinate them. all four kings, with Talon crucified in the dining hall. Before the plot can be carried out, however, Talon summons the strength to pull himself free from the crucifix, and then the rebels attack, led by Michael, storming the dining hall and overpowering Cromwell's soldiers. Cromwell attempts to flee the castle with Alana and tow, but Talon intercepts them. While he and the rebels clash with Cromwell's guards, Macelli then takes custody of Alana and brings her to the catacombs beneath the castle, where he reveals his true nature as Zusha. Although Cromwell tries to intercede, he is no match for the sorcerer, but Talon is able to resist Zusha's power long enough to strike him down with his projectile sword. Now, when I say a projectile sword, you got to understand, he pushes a button and a blade flies out like it's a missile. It's really silly. After then, he engages Cromwell in combat, finally slaying the evil king and exacting vengeance for losing his family. Afterwards, Talon saves Alana from a giant constrictor snake, which is kind of maybe Zusha, and then Zusha suddenly rises again, prompting Talon to finish off the sorcerer with a blade that's concealed within his gauntlet. Having no interest in ruling the kingdom, even though he is the rightful heir, Talon cedes the role of king of the land to Micah. Alana honors her commitment to spend one night with Talon, and then Talon is off for his next adventure. It's a super camp, super cheesy movie. The acting is horrible. The three-bladed projectile sword is laughable. But it's so bad. It's just so funny to watch. Alana, played by Kathleen Beller, one of her favorite moves is a groin strike, and she just hits everybody in the nuts with her knee. It's ridiculous, and it's hilarious, especially at the climactic scene. I don't want to tell you why, but it's just so funny when she goes to use the move and something happens. It's not what she expects. And Richard Mole as Zusha just chews the scenery. I mean, he's hilarious, but he's also just so over the top. Now, what's baffling to me about this is that I knew Lee Horsley became Matt Houston later on. Richard Mole, of course, was on Night Court as Bull. Simon McCorkindale was Manimal. I did not know that Kathleen Beller had a career. I thought she was just one of those actresses who disappeared after one or two roles. The reality is she actually had an extensive career both before and after this movie, most notably on the TV series Dynasty. She played one of the lead, not one of the leads, but one of the ensemble cast that was there for 4 years. And The Bronx Zoo, which was an Ad Asner TV series. So I was just that was really surprising to me. And of course, those were actually well-received programs that lasted pretty good, time in the 80s. So she arguably had the best and most serious acting career of the entire cast, as Horsley's Matt Houston sucked. McCorkindale's Manimal was a farcical joke. Mole, of course, would get to be known for his role as Bull in Night Court, and he did some other things as well. But it was just interesting to find that out. The film, of course, is rated R. There's nudity, there's cussing, there's all kinds of stuff in this thing. It's just a mess. I give it 2 out of 5. You might even give it a 1.5. I'm being generous with the 2, I think. But it's funny. Lastly, and definitely not least, but we have Time Bandits from 1981. Directed and produced by Terry Gilliam, written by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, starring John Cleese, Sean Connery, Shelley Duvall, Catherine Hellman, Ian Holm, Michael Palin, Ralph Richardson, Peter Vaughn, David Warner, David Rappaport, Kenny Baker, Jack Purvis, Mike Edmonds, Tiny Ross, and Craig Warnock. That's a hell of a cast too. This is kind of like one of those It's not a Monty Python film, but it is in a way. Our production companies are Handmade Films and Janus Films, distributed by Avco Embassy Pictures. The release date in the U.S. was November 6 of 1981. It has a running time of an hour and 53 minutes. And what it's about, 11-year-old Kevin has a vivid imagination and is fascinated by history, particularly out of ancient Greece. His parents ignore him and ignore his activities, having become obsessed with buying the latest household gadgets in order to keep up with their neighbors. One night, as Kevin is sleeping, an armored knight on a horse bursts out of his wardrobe. Kevin is scared and hides as the knight rides off into a forest setting where his bedroom wall once was. But when Kevin looks back out, his room is back to normal, and he finds one of his photos on the wall similar to the forest he saw. The next night, he prepares a satchel with supplies and a Polaroid camera, but is surprised as 6 dwarves spill out of the wardrobe. Kevin quickly learns that the group is still on a large, worn-out map and is looking for an exit from his room before they are discovered. They find that the bedroom wall can be pushed, revealing a long hallway. Kevin is hesitant to join them until the apparition of a floating, menacing head, the Supreme Being, appears behind them, demanding to return to the map. Kevin and the dwarves fall into an empty void at the end of the hallway. Now, Kevin and the dwarves have this wild, romping adventure. They land, as they fall into the void, they land in Italy during the Napoleonic Wars. Kevin learns that Randall was the lead dwarf of the group, which also includes Fidget, Strutter, Og, Wally, and Vermin. They were once employed by the Supreme Being to repair holes in the space-time fabric, but instead they realized the potential to use the map to steal riches. With the map and Kevin's help, they visit several locations in space-time and meet figures such as Napoleon Bonaparte and Robin Hood. Kevin uses his camera to document their visits. However, they aren't aware their activities are being monitored by Evil, a malevolent being who is able to manipulate reality and attempting to acquire the map for himself so that he can remake the universe to his own design. Through Evil's actions, Kevin becomes separated from the group and ends up in Mycenaean Greece, meeting King Agamemnon. After Kevin inadvertently helps Agamemnon kill an enemy, the king adopts him. Randall and the others soon locate Kevin and abduct him, much to Kevin's resentment, and escape through another time hole, arriving on the ill-fated RMS Titanic, and now they're all forced to tread water while they argue over whose fault this all is. Evil then manipulates the group and transports them to his realm, the Time of Legends. After surviving encounters with ogres and the giant, Kevin and the dwarves locate the Fortress of Ultimate Darkness, and they're led to believe that the most fabulous object in the world awaits them, luring them into Evil's trap. Evil takes the map from them and locks the group in a cage over an apparently bottomless pit. But while looking through Polaroids he took of their adventures, Kevin finds one that includes the map, and the group realizes there's a hole in the fortress near them. They escape from the cage, steal the map again, and split. But in the meantime, Kevin must distract the pursuers while the others go through the hole, and Evil confronts Kevin and takes the map back from him. The dwarves, however, return with various warriors and fighting machines taken from across time. Of course, though, Evil is evil, and he has no trouble overpowering them all. As Kevin and the dwarves cower, Evil prepares to unleash his ultimate power. Suddenly, he is engulfed in flames and burned into charcoal. Poof! From the smoke, a besuited elderly man emerges, revealed as the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being then says he allowed the dwarves to borrow his map, and this whole adventure had been a test of his creation. He orders the dwarves to collect all the pieces of concentrated evil, warning that they can be deadly if not contained, recovers the map, and allows the dwarves to rejoin him in his creation duties. The Supreme Being then disappears with the dwarves, leaving Kevin stranded behind as a missed piece of evil begins to smolder. And Kevin's frightened. He's screaming for help. And then Kevin awakens in his bedroom to find it's filled with smoke. Firefighters break down the door and rescue him as they put out a fire in his house. One of the firemen finds that his parents' new toaster oven caused the fire. As Kevin recovers, he finds that one of the firemen resembles Agamemnon, and discovers that he still has the photos from his adventure. Kevin's parents discover a smoldering rock inside the toaster oven. Recognizing it as a piece of evil, Kevin warns them not to touch it. They ignore him, of course. They touch it, and they explode, leaving only their shoes. Kevin tentatively approaches the smoking shoes and is seen from above as his figure grows smaller and shrinks away from the camera, revealing the Earth and in outer space before being rolled up in the map by the Supreme Being. Solace, 11 years old. 11-year-old mind blown. I don't know how many times I've watched this movie as a kid on cable. It was after the theatrical release. This was not something my parents were going to take me to when I was a kid. I probably saw this 4 or 5 dozen times in the 80s. Not only because it was a great movie, but because I was constantly trying to figure the movie out. What the hell drugs were Gilliam and Palin on when they wrote this? I mean, it's so brilliant. It's just goddamn brilliant. Love this movie. And the thing is, this is one of those movies you just cannot remake. Oh, sure, they could make it, but today they'd fuss it up with a bunch of bullshit special effects, and they wouldn't know who to cast, and it would just be horrible. This film is all about Guillaume's vision and this particular cast's ability to bring it to bear. Go ahead. Tell me who you're going to get. You're going to put James Gunn as the director? And then who's playing dwarves? Let me guess. You're going to CGI them, so it won't even matter who plays the roles. Who's going to play evil? John Delancey? I mean, that's who I think of immediately. But wouldn't that be kind of redundant, though, seeing as Q is really based off of evil and the Supreme Being from this film? Not that Delancey or the Trek people are ever going to admit to that, but that's what Q really is. I do know that this film will make an all-time best films list for me, but I'm not sure where I would place it yet. Definitely a 5-star film, rated PG. Love this movie. Cannot say enough about it. But I have to stop now. We've gone over an hour and almost an hour and a half. So let me say thanks for watching on that. And, there are a few things that I didn't mention. What about The Princess Bride? That was an 80s fantasy film. And yes, I agree. It belongs in a top favorite list, probably. There are others I didn't name. The reason I didn't name Princess Bride was because it didn't quite fit the thematic tone I ended up going with. All of these films tended to be more action adventurous type things with male leads, and The Princess Bride was very much more of a comedy fantasy. And I think that if I was going to go comedy fantasy, I would definitely put that in my top comedy fantasy, but that's a different genre. And there are other comedy fantasies of the 80s that I would think of as well. So maybe I'll revisit this theme again in the future for more lighthearted fantasy, more comedy fantasy films, I guess you could say. But don't think I was overlooking the film. Okay. So I want to thank you all for watching. If you want to get in touch with me, you reach me on Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven. Twitter at LewisBrightRave2, at DeviantArt.com/BrightRaven, on YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis BrightRaven. You can email me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com or at Yahoo at LewisBrightRaven@yahoo.com if you can't get me at the Gmail address. John Norris says this was fun. Thanks. I appreciate you hanging out with me and staying up, buddy. Mondays, comics news and reviews. Wednesdays, comics. What did you get this week? sometimes also do reviews as well. Thursday nights is our roundtable talk, guest night, topical talk, and Fridays 9 p.m. is genre night. Usually different genre each week. I hadn't been doing it, but I'm going to go back to a different genre next week. I think next week we're going to do westerns. I don't know exactly if I'm going to do a specific era or not yet, but we're going to do westerns next week. Western films will be our next genre discussion. Okay? So I will see you guys on Monday with our new reviews. See you until then. Have a good weekend.